Welcome to week 65 of Misha Dianne Watch Santa Barbara. We have finished episode 313, originally aired Monday, October 21st, 1985. And we are starting a new week. And we are recording this on July 30th, 2021, the 37th anniversary of Santa Barbara, and the second anniversary of our podcast. Episode 313, Cruz disarms Angel, and the gang kicks Angel out. He does not go happily, so he's going to be trouble. I don't know if he's going to have another gang, or if it'll just be Angel against the city. The clinic is a mess, but Cruz has ordered the gang to come and help him and Mary clean it up. Mary says Mason was in earlier sweeping up, and Cruz and Mary discuss Mason's interest in her. Cruz says, "You never know, especially with a Capwell."
He's probably thinking as much about his own situation with Eden as he is about Mason.
Dylan is barely dressed well enough to eat at the Orient Express. Kelly is treating them to lunch. Kelly, Nick, Dylan, and Janice, although at present Janice is not there yet. Kelly thinks that he knew who she was the whole time because there are photos of her all over Nick's apartment. But Dylan says, well, there's a photo of me in there too, and you'd recognize me. And she says, well, it's from high school. Dylan says if he knew she was Nick's girlfriend, he never would have tried anything. Then Janice arrives and tells Kelly about Dylan's gold mine. And later they discuss the fact that Kelly bought them lunch. And Dylan says, oh, that's just because she owns the restaurant. And Janice sets him straight that her sister owns the restaurant. And she also says, just because someone has money doesn't mean they're awful.
And I'm wondering if she's thinking of some of the other wealthy people she's met recently.
Such as Warren.
Could be, maybe.
That's interesting. Dylan's another one of these anti-rich people that have shown up.
Yes, he doesn't seem to be as homicidal as Steve Bassett yet, but he is very rude during his entire dinner in the restaurant. And
then Janice kind of asks him if he wishes she weren't there, if she's cramping his style. And he kind of doesn't say yes to that, but it's not that. I don't know if he's that convincing. Later, Kelly tells Nick about the fact that she met Dylan a day or two earlier. He doesn't seem to care that much. Eden chases Gina around the atrium, and they jostle some scaffolding, which spills some paint all over Gina's Polaroids of Eden's antics.
This seemed like a classic Alexis and Crystal kind of catfight to me.
There was this previously unseen scaffolding suddenly in the middle of the atrium, and I wasn't exactly sure what was happening, and it wasn't clear there was paint on it until suddenly they showed the paint being jostled. So, seems to have been awful convenient that was there. Meanwhile, Kirk eavesdrops again, as Gina says, if you're so concerned with what your daddy wants, why don't you let him die? And then Eden tells her to pipe down as Kirk is in the kitchen, not realizing Kirk has already arrived with the tea. Gina says he should hear how she's leading him on. Then Kirk comes in and suggests to Gina she should get out of those clothes, which are covered in paint. And Gina says to Eden, I wonder how many times a day he says that. So she's implying there is something going on between Kirk and Eden. Eden tells Cece that she got his letter. And Eden tells Mary that Cece didn't want to be a burden. And Mary says, is he a burden? And Eden says, of course not. And then Mary says, well, then he's got his wish. So this is an interesting way to see things. And so perhaps Mary, just this little comment from Mary is enough to change Eden's mind.
Yeah, and I wonder if, later on, if Gina tries something to implement Eden in possibly attempting to kill Cece, if this comment that Mary has made is something that will influence how Eden will answer that situation if it comes up.
My other thought is that if Eden's changed her mind, and she mentions it to Gina, then Gina's going to have to accelerate her plan before she tells anyone else that she's changed her mind. Because that's most of what the plan is to make it look like Eden was planning this. So.
That's very true.
Eden is having trouble focusing on work because she's thinking about Cece. And she mentions the letter to Kirk. Kirk says that Jack never mentioned it to him. And he actually starts to call Jack, but Eden stops him. Because I guess she does not want, too many people to know about her agonizing. Kirk says that she needs to be like a plate spinner with all these things that she's dealing with. But the plate that's about to fall is the Capwell Company, so that's the one she should be focused on. And somehow throughout that conversation she manages to agree to meet him for dinner. The other nurse tells Gina not to open Cece's window because fresh air could give him pneumonia.
And of course Gina sort of sparks up when she hears that.
And she immediately writes it down in her little notebook. She tells Cece that she's learned so much since he's been sick. And she said, "You always told me I should have a project to keep me busy, and I finally found one. I tried to remember your manner of speaking, and I wrote a letter using your words, and I even copied your signature. The letter I wrote to Eden was my masterpiece." So I was right when I thought that perhaps Gina had written that letter.
Yes, that was
maybe
really
that's
good.
something I remembered, though, but maybe there were enough little clues as to just the way that episode was structured.
Yeah, how she just happened to bring it in.
Mm-hmm. Eden dreams of Cece's empty bed. And in her dream, the window is wide open, interestingly enough. And she wakes up sitting in the chair in Cece's room. Gina enters and says, "Go ahead. I'll keep quiet if that's what you want. Don't you have the nerve?" And that is what happened. We were trying to remember what happened in this episode, because it's actually been a few days since we watched it. We watched it on July 19th, so 11 days ago. And yesterday we were trying to think, did we already do the podcast? And we were trying to think what happened in this episode. And actually, there wasn't a lot memorable, really, that happened. So that's probably why we weren't sure if we'd actually done the podcast already.
Yeah, we couldn't remember. We were actually looking back over previous episodes to see if we had actually done it and forgotten to log it or something like that. But,
and I guess it's the end of the contract period because the credits have now removed all the people who have left the show. And did you want to hazard a guess as to who's actually gone that we haven't seen for a while?
Oh, wow. That's, I'm trying to think who we haven't seen for a while. We know we haven't seen any Perkins except for Amy.
Not any Perkinses.
We've only seen one very, very brief appearance by the new Santana. But I doubt if they would get rid of her after one very brief appearance.
Not Santana.
No.
Not any Andrades.
Then it's probably someone I've forgotten already. Although we certainly haven't seen Lakin for a while, so I'm still expecting when she pops up again, there'll perhaps be a recast on that.
So removed from the credits this week are Jack, Christy, and Lakin. So Ted doesn't really seem to have a story since all of his people have left the show.
Yeah, I had noticed Christy was absent actually, and I'm hoping that maybe it'll be some offhand comment or something that Mary makes that will explain that.
I mean, Theta sort of had her last episode without any fanfare. And then Christy kind of didn't really say goodbye in the last episode that she was in. So Lakin at least has left town, so...
Yeah. And, well, Jack, of course, I guess the actor was... I guess he was still alive at this point, but certainly not in the
not
best
on
health.
contract.
Yeah.
So, but they do keep mentioning him, so they might be trying to decide whether they're going to recast or not.
Yeah, I mean, they were certainly setting him up as being sort of a major player character even before the actor had to step away. So
I think with Kirk not being a lawyer, that they probably are keeping Jack on the canvas, or at least next to the canvas, so that he can phone Kirk with, lawyerly information from time to time that Kirk wouldn't know as just a business person. So they're probably hedging their bets in case there's something that they need Kirk to know.
yeah.
Danny, I guess, wasn't in the right episodes this week. He didn't get into the credits. Angel is in again, and Ricardo is in the credits. I don't remember who Ricardo is.
I'm assuming maybe it's one of the gang members. I don't know.
Oh, yes, maybe.
Yeah.
Oh, no, there's Spider.
Could it be was it this episode that we saw the other policeman who had stepped away, or was
no, I thought that was yesterday.
Yeah.
Oh, I have here in my detailed comments, cleanup in progress. Spider and Ricardo have to go. So Ricardo's the other gang member who's not Spider.
Okay.
But yet Spider doesn't get a credit, even though he's more memorable. And then Janice is once again in the credits. I guess we saw her at just the right time. So. And that is it for the Monday episode. We are heading towards the end of October. So, tomorrow is Tuesday, October 22nd, 1985. And we'll be back after we've watched episode 314 of Santa Barbara. See you then.
Bye-bye.
Go ahead. I'll keep quiet if that's what you want. Go on. Don't you have the news?
Welcome back.
Hello.
We finished episode 314 of Santa Barbara, originally aired Tuesday, October 22nd, 1985. And after we did yesterday's show, we discovered a celebrity in the streets of Vancouver. Now, it's almost Santa Barbara related, because Jane Sibbett, who will be showing up on Santa Barbara next year, worked on the famous Teddy Z with John Cryer, whom we saw in his role as Lex Luthor yesterday, shooting what I believe is Lex Luthor's final scene in the final episode of Supergirl.
Yeah, no spoilers, but it'll be a pretty exciting ending.
No spoilers, but Lex Luthor is up to no good. Isn't he just a poor man's Matthew Broderick? That's one of my favorite lines from the famous Teddy Z. My favorite one is Drax!
I never have watched the show with you, so...
Well, I finished my rewatch, so it's too late now.
I saw him in... Was it Pretty in Pink or something? He was in a John Hughes
He was in one of those, or maybe both of them.
Yeah.
Mason takes Mary for a horseback ride on the beach. So that was a location shoot without sound. So there was no dialogue, it was just them on the beach and music. Oh, was there music? Probably.
There was music, and I recognized the music, but I can't remember who it was. And I was assuming you had written it down.
Well,
so.
Mason and Mary riding on location is all I wrote. I guess I was... we did actually see a different scene where Danny put a quarter in the jukebox and played Some Like It Hot by Power Station. So that's... the music I did make a note of. Cruz urges Danny to leave town for a while. Angel takes Mary and Mason hostage at the clinic and lures Cruz there. Cruz tries to talk Angel out of it by talking about how Angel's brother Geraldo was killed by the police in a similar situation. And I think Cruz manages to get Angel to put down his gun, but Mason had escaped before this point and had brought the SWAT team back. And as SWAT bursts in, there's a bit of a commotion, and in the end, Angel grabs his gun again and aims it at Cruz.
And can I just make 2 points about, we've now seen a couple of scenes throughout a couple of episodes where Cruz is interacting with Angel and interacting with the gang. I mean, we saw them at the beach house confrontation or the beach bar, and we see them again. And there's just a couple of things that always strike me in these scenes. First of all, I noticed that A. Martinez affects a really Mexican almost accent when he's talking to the gang members. And I'm wondering if he does that to try to approximate or give the impression that maybe they're actually speaking in Spanish.
Oh.
That was an idea I had, because it's very noticeable.
Never occurred to me, no.
Because Cruz doesn't really talk like that. So that was the only reason I could think of why he might be doing that, because obviously they're not going to have subtitles on a show like Santa Barbara. So
I just assumed he was like trying to fit in with the kids by sort of speaking more like them. I don't know.
Well, to me, I don't think if I were in a gang, I would find that a very sort of compelling way to be part of the gang. It's almost like you're ridiculing the accent, which I don't think would be his intention. So that's why I was thinking there might be this other explanation. But
I don't know. I think he just. I think it's part of his "I'm one of you" thing that he's trying to do by not rejoining the police force. I'm just another Hispanic guy living in Santa Barbara, just like you guys.
But again, Danny doesn't do that, right?
No.
So anyway, so that's one thing I'd noticed. Not really a clear explanation of why, I guess. But you're probably right. That's probably what's intended. The other thing that I always really notice in this is that Angel is actually not Latin. He's actually South Asian. So I always find that kind of, I don't know if back in the 80s maybe it was felt that, anyone with a certain skin color could kind of pass for anything. And, we certainly see that. Even going back to the 60s, if you look at some of the old Westerns and that, a lot of the Native Americans are clearly Italian, or they're, clearly not ethnically, Asian, Native American. But it is really noticeable to me.
And some of the other members of the gang are clearly not Hispanic either.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just more of the neighborhood, I guess. I don't know. It's just like, as I said, I don't really know what Santa Barbara's barrio is like in real life, but I guess they're just trying to evoke a sense of this type of gang and this type of community, just sort of a generic thing that you can just fill in the gaps yourself as a viewer, maybe. I don't know if they had any Hispanic writers even on Santa Barbara. So we were just watching that history of sitcoms, and they were talking about, a few black writers on some of the Norman Lear shows that they were discussing. So it may be a similar thing. It's like, people with a European background trying to write, Hispanic characters on Santa Barbara and just doing their best with the stereotypes and the tropes that they have available to them from years of fiction. And then the other storyline of the day, Brick calls Julia to help him figure out who's framing him. But he doesn't want to come right out and say that Amy and him think it's Augusta, because obviously that's Julia's sister. And he stops Amy from saying Augusta's name at one point. But Julia promises to look into it, and they want to get that done before Lionel and Augusta come home in 2 weeks. But Warren phones, and Lionel and Augusta... No, Julia phones, and Lionel picks up, because Lionel and Augusta have come home early. So they all race over to the Lockridge house, and the Lionel and Augusta have revealed to Warren that they discovered the Swiss bank account with Brick's name on it. And when they showed Julia that paperwork, she says the signature looks a bit shakier than the one on all the deposit slips. And Brick actually says, oh yeah, I pre-signed all those deposit slips. to save time. So that explains, that half of it. So it was the opening of the Swiss account that Augusta had him sign when he was, under the influence at the hospital. And as soon as Amy and Brick are alone in the room with Augusta, they confront her about that. And they say, we know you framed me, and Amy saw you in my room that night with the papers. Yeah. So Augusta's still standing her ground, last we saw, and, no one else from the family has overheard that. Lionel, Julia, and Warren are all in the next room. So, yeah, I don't know if Augusta's thing will fall apart, or if this will continue to look bad for Brick for a little while longer.
I don't know. I mean, and maybe this says more about me and my sort of boring taste, but I'm actually finding this particular storyline more compelling than the Gold Nugget and Treasure Map, or the gangs of Santa Barbara for sure, or even whatever is going on between Gina and Eden at the moment. Certainly more compelling than Mason and Mary. So I'm actually kind of excited about this storyline. I think that we're seeing a risk that Augusta's taken that I don't think she's fully taken on yet, because she's got Julia not believing that Brick could be capable of this. She's already on thin ice with Lionel. That's why they went to Europe in the first place. You see, Warren is actually very invested in this. Like, he's really concerned about it. So I think when, and I do think it'll be when, this all blows up on Augusta, I think it's going to do her a lot of damage within the family. Not to mention with Minx. So I think that's the first thing I was really thinking about. And then I was also thinking about, even if this goes on a bit longer, I would think at some point, especially if Minx really feels inclined to believe Brick, or at least want to check out his claims a bit more, wouldn't she perhaps have more connections than any of them with the Swiss bank? I mean, I would think that someone with the right connections could find out who actually opened the account. And if not Minx, I mean, remember, Julia goes back with Jack Stanfield Lee. He probably has all sorts of connections as well. So I really think one way or another this is going to be found out. And it will be very difficult for Augusta after that.
It is interesting that Lionel and Augusta did go into the Swiss bank, because I had thought, what if that guy is there that Augusta used to open the account, and he recognizes her and just starts talking about the account she opened for Brick, right? So, but maybe he's based in Santa Barbara, and she wasn't worried about running into him there in Switzerland.
Yeah, and I mean, we don't know how big this bank is, or, I mean, it might be enormous. It might have connections all over the place. We actually have a private bank of some kind on our street, and it doesn't look like a very big place. Obviously, we have never been, and probably will never be, on the inside of that, but maybe that's just a storefront for a very large organization.
And they did mention, this is going to be really devastating for Minx, because she wasn't in this episode, and presumably she's upstairs in the house or out being chauffeured around town by Janice somewhere. But I wonder if Minx will be brought into this storyline while it's ongoing, or if they'll wait till one way or the other. They either think they have Brick, or they think they have Augusta, and then just fill Minx in. I don't know.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see how she comes in. I'm assuming that this storyline in some way will move ahead our knowledge of Brick's background, and that more things will come to light as a result of that.
I think if Brick ends up, looking like he's heading for jail, I think Minx might have to reveal the secret or something, you know. Oh, you know, he's a Lockridge or something like that, you know. And then really that, I think, then would drive a big wedge between Lionel and Augusta, because if it comes out that she's done all this to a relative of Lionel's, then it's like, you know, it's very personal to Lionel. And I can see that breaking them up for a while.
Well, also, if that were the case, it's the second relative of Lionel's that she's put a wedge in between, because, as I say, they went off to Europe because she wasn't happy with the relationship he was trying to build with Brandon.
That's true. All right, well, that was it. That was just 3 little storylines in this episode. Somehow it filled a full hour. So there was a lot of scenes of Angel waiting at the clinic for Cruz or Mary or Mason to arrive. So I guess there was some padding once I wrote down the actual plot. It was quite minimal. All right, we'll be back after we've watched episode 315. We'll see you then.
Bye-bye.
Hello.
Hello.
Welcome back. We finished episode 315 of Santa Barbara, which originally aired Wednesday, October 23rd, 1985. The SWAT team, I assume it's the SWAT team, wants to take Angel in, and Cruz tries to stop them and says, I'll place him under citizen's arrest if I have to. He doesn't trust them not to beat up Angel when they take him in, and he's promised Angel, you know, he can just turn himself in quietly. The SWAT team complains to Captain Dreyer, and Cruz is called in, and they do, I guess, an interrogation. He turns on his tape machine, and he says it's Friday, October 18th, which it would be if we hadn't had all those preemptions recently, but we're actually on Wednesday, October 23rd. Cruz is wondering if he's going to be arrested or what's going to happen, but the commissioner barges in and says that there's a lot of public support behind Cruz, and he asks him to take his badge back. I don't think Captain Dreyer was quite expecting that. He says to him later, "Next thing I know, you'll be after my job." Kirk is annoyed as Eden pins the badge back on Cruz. So Kirk's doing an annoyed face through most of the background of the scene where Cruz reveals he's agreed to take his badge back, and Eden pins it on him. Brick tells Lionel that Augusta had him sign some papers when he was barely conscious. Now, this doesn't really register too much with Lionel. I think he's pretty focused on, the evidence they have. So Lionel tells Brick he's going to prosecute him. Minx walks in right at that moment and says, "Not while I'm alive." So we were wondering how Minx would be involved, if at all. So that was nice to see her in the whole episode.
Yeah.
She ends up having a heart-to-heart with Brick, asking him if he stole the money, which I think would really annoy Brick, since she's the one who's been secretive this whole time, and he's been nothing but upfront. So Brick doesn't answer. He says that he knows Minx called Glenn Wallace, and she denies it, once again lying to him, and he reveals that he found Glenn's number in her room. She's a little annoyed that he was in her room, but he tries to get her to confess something, and he says, "Well, I want to know who my real father is." And she says that she can't tell him. And he says he thinks it was T. MacDonald Lockridge. And she says, "Oh no, it can't be him. He was in Samoa the whole year before you were born."
So she knows quite a bit about that year he was born.
Yes, now of course, Minx has made up some stories on the spot in the past, and I don't know if we 100% buy that T. MacDonald Lockridge isn't the dad, but Brick certainly doesn't. He wants proof. Which I think is wise. Brick says, "You really are keeping secrets." Because I guess this is, she has revealed that she knows, but she can't tell him. And she says, "Yes, and I'll take them to my grave. I have no other choice."
Interesting.
So what do you think? Is any new thoughts, or Just waiting to see how it plays out.
Yeah, I'm kind of waiting to see how it plays out. I thought, actually, to me, one of the interesting things about this scene was Brick actually, they talk a little bit about this whole prosecution that Lionel's going to bring and this potentially terrible scandal over Brick embezzling funds. And Brick says, oh, I don't care about that. I can deal with that. But I'm really concerned about my parentage and that. So it's kind of interesting. It really shows, first of all, how much faith Brick has in his ability to show one way or another that he didn't do this. And in a way, he's kind of really reinforcing the idea that he sees Lionel and Augusta as being kind of the lightweights in the family, certainly next to Minx.
Now, after that meeting, Lionel asks about, what Minx has decided to do about the theft, and Brick says, oh, we barely talked about that.
Yeah.
So Augusta and Lionel decide they need to do some more snooping in Minx's room, and they argue over which one of them is going to do it.
Yeah. And it's interesting because, we've been playing with this idea for quite some time, about Brick's heritage and why Minx is so interested in him. And we start to see a little glimmer of that now with Lionel and Augusta. They're starting to think, why is she so interested in him and protecting him?
And presumably there's more to be found in Minx's room, so maybe we will learn a little more. Maybe Lionel and Augusta will snoop together.
Yes, I'm starting to think Minx's room might be a little bit like your mom's room was, which had layers and layers and layers of secrets.
I haven't found any about any mysterious family members yet. Gina finds out that Mason was shot and demands that Mary close the clinic. Mason comes home. Now, Mason's not actually in this episode, but they talk about Mason, they say he's in the hospital, they say he's home. So all that stuff happens without Lane Davies actually being on screen. Kirk and Eden are off to Washington tomorrow to close the deal. They're doing a lot of deals. Cece had a lot of stuff ongoing. Kirk wants to go over the plans, but Eden wants to spend time with Cruz. Kirk asks if Cruz is really the right guy for her to marry. Maybe Kirk is thinking of marrying her himself. Gina tells Rosa that she and Cece had decided to give the staff 2 weeks off this year, and they can all start on Saturday. I wouldn't mind having them all gone at the same time. You can make us dinner, on Saturday and then leave. This, we don't actually see Rosa's. That phone has recently exhibited the ability for them to call Rosa somehow. So there must be a button or something that puts it through to, presumably the kitchen is where Rosa hangs out, because she answered very quickly. But we didn't really hear a buzz anywhere, from one of the other 8,000 phones in that room. So there must be a direct line to the kitchen. And
this actually opens up the possibilities that this phone could kind of keep alive relationships with characters who we know have left, like Philip, for example.
That's true. There's a button for Philip's room. Button for Sally down on her beachfront property. Eden announces a big party celebrating Cruz, talking down Angel and not being killed. She says, big party, everyone dressed to kill, which is kind of funny. And Gina says that she'll have to do it with no staff. Eden is a little bit perturbed, but immediately pivots and says they're going to have it at the Orient Express. Then Gina overhears Eden talking about the hairdo she's going to have at the party. And she promptly calls Andre and orders a wig that matches the same description. So I feel like Gina is going to dress herself like Eden.
I feel that too. Between the dress she still has stashed away in a closet and Eden's wig, I think she will be able to maybe, from the back, in dim light, be able to pass herself off as Eden.
So I don't know if having the party But the Orient Express is going to be problematic because Gina would need Eden to come home for some reason with very few other witnesses, but enough to say that she was home and to be able to frame her for something. So, yeah, we'll see how that works itself out. Usually these things are resolved surprisingly easily.
Yes.
When we think, oh, there's going to be a bit of a roadblock tomorrow for such and such a character's issue, and then next thing you know, it's easily surmounted. So, yeah, we will see if somehow during the party Gina talks Eden into going home briefly, or tricks her into going home briefly, and then sets her plan in motion to frame Eden. Well, we'll see, and I guess if it's Saturday, the Captain Dreyer said it was Friday today. So does that mean the party's tomorrow in Santa Barbara time?
I don't know.
Maybe.
Could move things along quite quickly.
Yeah, maybe something very exciting will happen tomorrow, or it could be a week-long party.
Well, yes, I think perhaps a hint might be how close we are to sweeps.
Yeah, October 24th. I mean, sometimes they start, in the week before. Maybe they start on Monday always, so I'm thinking maybe next Monday. So we got a Thursday and a Friday show. But then again, they're 3 episodes behind where they thought they'd be, so it would start a little later than expected. So we might have another week. So maybe they're talking about next Saturday already. So we'll have a week of talking about the party and planning for it. And we haven't seen Dylan and Kelly and Nick for a while, so probably have a day of them filling. Mm-hmm. Don't know what Ted's up to. Is he going to school every day? I don't know.
Maybe Lakin will show up.
Santana has done nothing. She's only been on one day since the recast.
Yeah.
So, and of course, Rosa half the time is not actually seen when she is in an episode. So, there are a few other people that don't really have any storylines right now. So I guess we'll be seeing the Dylan, Janice, Carlo storyline progressing. And, Carlo or Carlos? And, the Lockridge thing hopefully will race ahead, because it's kind of an exciting one.
Yeah, that's probably the one I'm the most excited about right now.
And we'll see when Augusta finally is unmasked as the person behind this plot. We'll see if she's banished from the Lockridge house by Minx and Lionel.
Yeah, that'll be interesting, because we probably will have Minx investigating this. We've got Julia investigating it.
Warren's
investigating it. Of course, he's a journalist now, so that's part of his job. And Brick is not going to let this go. And plus, we've got Nick working on it as well. And Nick, now that Cruz is reinstated, it's possible Nick might even bring in Cruz if it's something that requires a little bit of official.
Yeah, that's interesting, actually. Yeah, maybe there's something new on the horizon for Cruz in his new role. That's storyline-wise that's coming up that'll be mixed into the storylines. Well, I'm looking forward to that break into Minx's room, and hopefully they will find something new that will interest us. All right, we'll be back after we watch episode 316. We'll see you then.
Bye-bye.
They all forgot that you were never very fatherly when you were healthy and stomping around the house. I'm going to grant you your wish and turn off these machines. But I'm going to make it look like Eden did it, just to be safe.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We finished episode 316 of Santa Barbara, originally aired Thursday, October 24th, 1985. Before we start, yesterday I found a very recent interview that Gwyneth Paltrow did with Robin Wright on YouTube. And unless they paid $12 million for the rights to all the clips they showed for a half an hour, I think you might have to watch it very quickly. So I think they might, they may have overstepped some things. First 5 minutes is scenes from Santa Barbara. About 2 seconds each. But there's actually a massive spoiler for early next year in there, so you can't watch it.
So I may never see it.
No, unless I edit a version with that blanked out. There's also spoilers for the stuff we've already seen too. surprisingly. So, yeah, but anyway, it was a good interview. So if you know everything about Robin Wright's time on Santa Barbara, then you can safely watch it. On the show, Dylan has won a bunch of money in a card game. He and Janice show up at Sally's apartment while Nick and Kelly have been wondering where they are. And he says he's almost got enough money to go back to Africa to find Sam.
And we wish him Godspeed on that.
He said, last time I saw Sam, there were 6 trucks pulling up on the tarmac, and Carlo's seaplane was just about to land. So now we know that Carlo has a seaplane. So.
And I'm curious, if we'll see Sam and just how Sam is feeling about Dylan, because we do learn that Dylan kind of left him there at Carlos's mercy.
And it seems to have been quite a few weeks or maybe even months since that happened.
Yeah, so will Sam still be a friend of Dylan's, or will Sam be another enemy?
Maybe Sam and Carlo have teamed up.
Yeah.
So now, basically, Nick and Kelly have had some time to digest Dylan's gold mine scheme. And Nick starts out with, well, running a mine costs a lot of money. And then Kelly says, and if you just found a mine somewhere in Africa, someone else probably owns that land.
Yeah.
Which is, the most sensible thing. You just don't show up in another country and go, oh, I'm going to start mining gold out of this piece of land that I happen to have stumbled across. Very bizarre. So, Dylan seems to think, oh, just don't know how things are done there, and, this is in the middle of Africa, so, no one owns that.
I really loved that they brought out this very practical matter, because so often things like that are just kind of glossed over. But yeah, I loved that they brought that out. And when you think about it, like present day, China has invested massive amounts of infrastructure in African countries just to get the rights to some of those mines.
Mm-hmm.
Dylan's a little out of his league here, I think.
Just before Dylan and Janice arrived, Kelly had said to Nick, you're sensible and he's not. And that made me think of that Goofus and Gallant, or Goofus and Gallant, I guess, cartoon from Highlights when I was a kid. Maybe Nick and Dylan are the Goofus and Gallant of Santa Barbara.
Mm-hmm.
Dylan wants Nick to come to Africa with him because, of course, having been in Vietnam, Nick has a lot of experience working in the hot jungle.
And we know how much Nick loves re-experiencing his Vietnam days.
Mm-hmm. I bet the people who live there know a little something about working in the hot jungle, assuming this mine is in the jungle somewhere. That's the assumption. So, I don't think he needs Nick necessarily.
No.
Although, I guess maybe he wants to make sure he can speak the same language, but then they're still going to need a translator if no one speaks English. So, Nick does not really want to go to Africa to work on that mine. After Nick and Kelly leave to visit Cruz, the State Department guys, who I assume are actually Carlo's guys, show up. Dylan climbs out the window, and Janice pretends to be Kelly when she answers the door. But they don't buy it, and they walk in just, I guess, early enough to see Dylan leaping out the window, so they go after him. Cruz has bought a rundown beach house for himself and Eden to live in, as a surprise for Eden. A wedding surprise, I guess. I thought this was a really cool back projection effect of showing the beach right outside the window. It looked really good.
Yeah, it did. And I can see where, if this is the direction they're heading and kind of moving Cruz to a beachside house, that'll actually give them a lot more possibilities to work with than the confines of a little boathouse.
Yeah, I personally don't remember whether they moved there or not, or what happened. So this will be interesting to see. Nick and Kelly show up because I guess he's called them there, and they walk in like, "Oh, is this like a crack house that you busted?" Or oh, did some people vandalize this place? Is that why you're investigating? He goes, no, I bought this, Ross. Kelly's like, oh, cool play. It's got character. So anyway, it's a dump, and Cruz says he wants to surprise Eden with it on Saturday, which we know is either 1 or 7 days away in Santa Barbara time, because the party is next Saturday. So Nick and Kelly have to help him fix it up, I guess.
Yeah, and as two people who have just bought a new place ourselves, which is not a dump, and just trying to organize moving stuff out of a storage locker and just doing little kind of small fixes. Good luck getting that done in 1 day or a week.
Mm-hmm. So Nick eventually leaves for whatever reason, and Dylan climbs in the window, because of course he's hiding from Carlo's men, and wants to borrow Kelly's car, and she's kind of still not that happy that Dylan exists. So, but he tries to talk her into it by saying, "We're just alike. We're free spirits," or whatever, kind of nonsense he spouts. So, before she can really say, "No, you can't have my car," Carlo's men knock on the door. So Dylan runs and hides in the closet, and Kelly opens the door, and they show her a Polaroid of Dylan, and she says, "Oh, I think I can help you."
Now, I'm assuming this is just kind of a red herring, that she'll direct them in another direction or something like that.
That's what I'm thinking. But Dylan seems to think, oh, she's about to give me up.
But it's kind of interesting how they seem to be, to me, they seem to be experimenting a little bit with where they want to take Kelly, because on the one hand, we show her being very practical and really standing by Nick. But then we've had these little moments where they've really tried to emphasize that she's a rebel spirit, and so that they seem to be trying to emphasize that she might actually find Dylan appealing. So, or his goals or whatever. So I find that interesting, and it'll be kind of interesting to see how that plays out, if it does, or if it just fizzles out like things do. This kind of reminded me, we're actually watching some very early seasons of The Wire right now, and the episode we just saw, the characters are doing a lot of talking about idiot relatives and how they wish they could just get rid of them, but they can't, and the whole Dylan Nick storyline sort of reminded me of that.
Eden reads Cruz Cece's letter, which of course we all know was really written by Gina. And she says, well, at least I know you'll support me. He says, no, I'm not going to support you if you make the wrong decision. Later, Eden tells Kirk that she's going to announce her engagement at the party and wants him and Jack to help her get Cruz promoted to captain. So this was actually interesting. In the last episode, Captain said, oh, he's going to want my job next. And maybe he realized that's just the sort of things that Cap Wells would do for a future in-law, and maybe he's seen the writing on the wall already.
Yeah.
So, that'd be interesting to see if Cruz gets promoted to captain so early on in the show.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, we're seeing lots of little foreboding indications that Cruz may not like this. He may not like a job as a pencil pusher. And I have a feeling that unless Cruz really does an incredible makeover on this house, Eden may not love the new house either. So it sort of seems like the gifts that Cruz and Eden have in store for each other may not be necessarily quite the fit they're hoping for.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That's right. They were both teasing each other with the fact that they've got secret gifts for each other. So Eden wants Kirk to talk to Jack. Kirk goes to Julia, presumably after talking to Jack, and asks her to put in a good word for Cruz with the commissioner's wife, with whom she happens to have gone to college. Julia's a little annoyed that he knows all that about her, so that must have come from Jack. A lot of talk about Jack in this episode. Later, Cruz is signing some documents for Julia. Maybe that's for the house purchase or something. But anyway, he casually lets it slip that Kirk is Jack's son, which Julia didn't know, and Cruz was surprised Julia didn't know. And Julia is extremely upset and barges out and goes back to the Orient Express, where Kirk still is, apparently, or is again, having a different meal there, and gets very angry with Kirk for not telling her, and says, there was another guy here who wasn't really Jack Lee a few months ago, and you know what I did to him? And she pours the water in his lap, just as she did to Jerry Cooper all those months ago, although I think that was a different restaurant. She said he was sitting right there, but I'm pretty sure Jerry was in that Chinese restaurant or something. Anyway, Kirk doesn't know that.
And we do already know that she did, take quite a bit of aggression out on the real Jack many years ago in the early stages of their relationship, because that, of course, involved the entire thing about the scar that Jack had.
Mm-hmm. So I'm having hopes that Julia's, will have a storyline with Kirk, because since that first day they met, maybe they've had one scene together, once at the beach bar, the day she met Dylan. But maybe there's a Kirk Julia story that is actually being woven, built from the shards of what would have been a Julia and Jack story, perhaps. Cruz suggests that Eden should see a psychiatrist, and Kirk shows up with Eden's cover of Modern Businesswoman and a whole bunch of Eden's clothes that Rosa helped him pick out, because there's going to be a press conference about the cover. When Kirk leaves, Cruz orders his men to investigate Kirk Cranston, or Kirk Lee, whichever.
And apparently this is not the first time Cruz has had this idea, because he says, how are you guys coming with that investigation? So it sounds like he's been trying to get some dirt on Kirk for, ever since Kirk came into their lives, basically.
It seems like the kind of guy that has something to find. So we will see. Eden comes out of the bathroom. Oh yeah, Kirk had also brought along a makeup artist. Eden comes out of the bathroom ready for her press conference. And she says, I haven't seen Kirk. And Cruz says, maybe he's picking out your underwear. So a lot of snarky comments between Kirk and Cruz, if not necessarily in each other's presence. So that's kind of fun. I like Kirk Cranston.
Yeah, and one thing that this show does make very clear is that he's actually quite young, or they talk about him as being quite young, especially when he makes his initial appearance. So it is possible he hasn't accumulated a lot of dirt yet, but we'll have to see.
The doctor, Dr. Reston, was it? Reveals to Gina that Cece is getting worse. And, Gina said, Eden told me he was getting better. And then he said, maybe she was trying to spare you. But I don't think that's wise. I think the family should know the truth. So she gets angry that Eden lied to her. Downstairs, Eden is rereading Cece's letter. And we actually hear Charles Bateman in a voiceover reading the text of the letter, which was really written by Gina. So that's actually kind of interesting. So, is that allowed when you have a voiceover, to have it actually not be the person that wrote the letter? Maybe that's a weird type of fictional prose that I don't know about. There's probably a term for it. Like first person omniscient or whatever. It's a voiceover of a letter written by someone else. Term. We'll look into it for you. She shows Kelly a notebook that Cece had started writing when he got his diagnosis of all the things he wanted to do. And it's got a whole chapter on Kelly, and apparently he was thinking of either buying Kelly a gallery or having her put on the board of directors of the museum. And Kelly says, I would have turned these suggestions down if Dad was here. We're not going to go along with them just because he's in a coma, and I think you should, think the same way with regards to the letter he wrote you. Just because you wrote it down doesn't mean we have to do it. So that's a really good input from Kelly there.
Yeah, Kelly's being quite practical this week, which is kind of nice. And I I think it's really kind of interesting that, you know, of all the siblings, Aiden's really the only one who consistently refers to him as Daddy. I mean, Kelly does sometimes, but, you know, it really marks out that Aiden's got a very special and perhaps overly close relationship with her dad in terms of wanting his approval or whatever, which the others are not burdened with quite as much.
So when she gets a chance alone with Kelly, Gina says to her, I'm really worried about Eden. I think she's really going to help Cece commit suicide. And Kelly, you know, says, no, she's never going to do that. And Gina says, well, don't say I didn't warn you if something happens. So Gina overplays things a little bit, but this may be not too suspicious. But, you know, she should dial it back a little bit on the planting seeds, because it's going to look very obvious, you know, in the future, looking back on it. Gina goes up to Cece and reads to him from a book of criminal law, I guess, that she's found about the fact that if you help someone commit suicide, it's actually considered first-degree murder. And as she's talking about the various things, suddenly his heart rate goes up on the monitor. And Gina thinks, oh my God, Cece, can you hear me? So she starts saying things to try and, you know, make his heart rate go up if he can hear her. Like, oh, I heard around town that Lionel and Sophia are having an affair again. And his heart rate goes, I sleep with Mason every night, and he's such a much better lover than you. So anyway, she realizes that he can hear what's going on suddenly, and that if she wants to implement her plan, she might have to do it very soon, because he might well come out of his coma. So she pops open the box from the wig maker, Andre, and tries it on and compares her new look to the cover of Modern Businesswoman magazine. And that is all that happened, more or less, in that episode. And in the credits, this is the second time we see Cerebral Tracer furnished by CNS Systems. So that new piece of equipment that was installed last time actually is an actual piece of equipment. And I guess presumably that will play into Gina's plan, either to help, you know, us, the viewers, see exactly what's going on at that time, or perhaps Mary will see something on the tracer that will give a clue as to, you know, what happened or didn't happen if Gina tries to frame Eden. So, yeah, we will see how they use that. Or maybe they just thought it was another cool piece of equipment or maybe they got a call from a Santa Barbara fan at CNS Systems saying, hey, you know, we can lend you a computerized thing that would look really cool online and on the screen, and all we want is a credit. So.
Yeah. You know, it occurred to me watching this that if the plot had gone a little differently, she could have just as easily framed Sophia as well. I mean, you think about it, Sophia's already facing one murder charge, which we keep forgetting about. That would have been a pretty easy frame too, knowing that.
Well, Sophia got off from that murder, remember?
Well,
that's true. Community service. So
that is true. She's
probably picking up garbage whenever we don't see her.
Yeah, and we haven't seen her for a while.
No, maybe she and Lionel and Augusta all had a 2-week vacation at the same time.
Yeah, maybe that's it.
At Santana.
Yeah.
So, and of course Rosa wasn't physically in this episode. She was just discussed as having helped someone with something. So another episode without Margarita Cordova actually being in it. That's it for episode 316. Tomorrow we have 317, a Friday episode. And if my research is correct, next week we will finally meet Carlo.
Ooh, exciting.
So maybe the cliffhanger for Friday will end up with Kelly and Dylan being, you know, brought to a seaplane base by those henchmen. And as the seaplane lands Friday, and then Monday we see Carlo get off, something like that. That's going to be my prediction. And he'll say, Dylan Hotley. We got a hot man to find, or something. I assume he'll have an accent with a name like Carlo.
Yeah, it kind of sounds like he might, but we'll find out. I mean, because Marcello actually had a very different accent than we might have anticipated as well.
Well, we'll see after we watch episode 317 of Santa Barbara. See you then.
Bye.
I don't see Kirk.
Maybe he's picking out your underwear.
I'm really curious to know what the grand plan is for Kirk Cranston.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We finished episode 317 of Santa Barbara, which originally aired Friday, October 25th, 1985. Kelly reveals Dylan to the State Department guys, who turn out actually to be from the State Department. Now, I'm not clear if it's the same actors that we've been seeing all along, because I've kind of forgotten what they looked like. It turns out they want to hire him, and he thinks it's probably to smuggle guns, so he turns them down. So Kelly seems kind of impressed by Dylan, because the State Department has heard about his great exploits, humanitarian flights into Ethiopia and such.
Yeah, so this is, kind of casts Dylan in a little bit better light. And I was also thinking, you mentioned Ethiopia, and that was a really big deal around this time in the 80s, because this is when we had Band-Aid and we had We Are the World. There's these huge fundraising efforts to help with the Ethiopian famine, so it's kind of tying into that as well.
Then when Nick shows up, Dylan tells him that Kelly tried to fend off the State Department and hid him from them. So he lies to protect Kelly because she just gave him up, and
Yeah.
Kelly seems impressed by this as well.
Yes, she does.
And then, for the rest of the episode, Nick decides to completely undermine his relationship with Kelly by saying, you know what, I think it's time to settle down, let's get married. And she's like, what? What are you talking about? No, you're wild at heart, And he goes, oh, that's my brother Dylan. So Kelly gets more and more dejected throughout the episode as Nick talks about them settling down. He says, oh, I think we could live in a ranch in Ojai. She looks longingly at Dylan's jacket as Nick talks about buying that ranch.
And he also talks again, and we already know that this is an absolute mood killer with Kelly. He also talks again about the ghost town and all the good times they had there. And we remember that put him completely in the friend zone last time he did that. So I don't know why he'd bring it up again, but this is a happy memory for him, we know, but we also know she doesn't remember anything about it, so.
Yep, I think I've got a bad feeling about this after seeing all the things that happened in this episode.
Yeah.
Kirk tells Julia that he hasn't forgiven Jack for all the things he's done to her mother. Julia tells him that going for Eden Capwell is a step backwards for him, which is interesting. Julia mentions that Cruz is buying a beach house for Eden, and he asks her for the address. He says, I'm just curious as to where people are buying their beach houses these days.
I'm wondering if he's going to buy the shack next door or something like that.
Kirk tells Cruz he's going to continue to see a lot of Eden, and Cruz tells him that they're going to be married soon, and he's more annoyed about the euthanasia thing than anything. Cruz tells Nick he's investigating Kirk. Kirk gets a call from Jack telling him that someone is investigating him. He says who, and we don't hear what Jack says, so it's not clear at this point yet if Kirk knows that it's Cruz. Kirk goes to the beach house and throws a hammer through the window. But Cruz is just coming up the driveway, and the hammer lands at his feet, so Cruz pulls out his gun and bursts in and says, hands up, and Kirk spins around with his hands up. So, bit worried that Cruz was going to shoot Kirk, but it looks like, at least up until now, that hasn't happened.
I feel like they have too much storyline left for Cruz to just
Kill Kirk Cranston.
kill Kirk, yeah.
Especially with Jack not coming back. Yeah, so I don't know what this... I don't know how Kirk's going to talk his way out of breaking into their house and throwing their hammer through the window.
We'll find out.
We'll see. Oh, there was a fly. I threw the hammer at it. Mason tells Ted that Eden's turned to Kirk Cranston for advice. Ted is thinking that a lot of this conversation is just to try and get him to vote with him. But Mason talks about, the legacy of the company, and he says, as soon as you graduate, you're going to be an associate with the company. Gina is annoyed to find out that Mary is working on Saturday night. I guess she thinks the other nurse is a little more either has a routine that she can rely on better, or maybe she runs up the stairs slower, when she's been timing them, or
isn't quite as alert. Maybe she might be able to pull off a costume a little more effectively.
That's true, because Mary probably knows Gina better, although they probably both see her all day. So, maybe knows. Yeah, they both probably know Eden equally. Ted's in his tuxedo handing out Eden's invitations, and he hands Mason his, and then Mason offers to deliver Mary's to her. Mary tells Mason she can't go because she's got to work. So it's interesting because Mason is now going to try to talk Gina into letting her change the schedule. And of course, this is playing right into Gina's hands. But of course, Gina plays it cool. And she agrees that he can switch and take Mary to the party. But she says, you can have your fling with Mary, but you have to come back to me afterwards. So I think she's, picked up on all the relation between Mary and Mason, even no matter how much Mason has tried to cover for it.
Definitely.
Mason calls over 3 of Ginger's girls. So we actually hear him talk to Ginger, although we don't hear her side of the conversation, to model some dresses for Mary. And Mary picks a modest one, but he orders the low-cut one for her. Gina tells Mary that if a man buys an expensive dress for a woman, he expects something in return.
I kind of love that, even though she's not actually in the show anymore, I kind of love the fact that Ginger is still around after all the shenanigans she pulled with Peter and, kidnapping Kelly and all that stuff. That she's still around doing business in Santa Barbara with Mason.
We kind of thought she'd left town, but I guess she just left that warehouse or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Didn't she have a bag of money from Peter?
Yes.
Trying to remember how that worked out.
Good life.
She and Jack were both mentioned and did things in the show on the other end of telephone lines. They could have had a trifecta by calling up Philip and telling him to do something in the other room. Dylan gets a call from the shipping clerk at the airport saying that there's a package for him from Sam. Dylan has been expecting this and he's very excited, but when he gets there, it's a coffin. And the airport guy asks Dylan to identify the body. So he crowbars the coffin open and then leaves Dylan with the body for a few minutes. But Sam opens his eyes and pops up and starts laughing.
So apparently this is the kind of thing they do all the time to each other, because Dylan doesn't seem to be really surprised at all. Now, I was wondering as we watched that if Sam was in the cargo hold of the plane, if a person could actually survive that, because I think it would be very, very cold.
I don't know if you need oxygen too. Maybe he's got a tank in there. He was wearing a red African outfit. So yeah, we've met Sam briefly, and I don't necessarily think I recognize the actor's face, so I don't remember. Don't know if I remember the character or not, or how long he's on the show. So, but he's back just in time for Carlo, who I believe will be showing up on Monday. So there may be 5 people kidnapped in the very near future. And that is it for week 65. Did you have anything else you wanted to talk about before we move on?
Not that I can think of.
Excited next week. We'll see Carlo. We'll maybe find out a little more about how the gold mine goes. Kelly will probably dump Nick and go for Dylan. What else? Lionel and Augusta will be searching Minx's room. I'm excited about that too. So
yeah, hopefully we'll keep learning progressively a little bit more about that story.
We'll be back next week for week 66 of Misha and Dianne Watch Santa Barbara. See you then.
Bye-bye.
I wish I could tell you I
it isn't
believe
everybody's favorite cop. How you doing, Cruz? I'm just curious as to where people are buying their beach houses these days.